Have you ever been told without words that you don't belong somewhere? That your success, your ticket, your very presence must be a mistake? Imagine sitting in first class, ticket in hand, when a flight attendant looks you up and down and says, "This seat isn't for you." Now, what would you do? Stay silent to keep the peace or stand up, knowing your dignity might cost you everything? This is the true test of power, not how loudly you can shout, but how calmly you can hold your ground when the world tries to shrink you. Dr. Avery Morgan, one of America's most respected CEOs, faced that moment in 30 minutes. A single phone call didn't just ground a plane. It forced an entire industry to look in the mirror. So, what would you have done in her place? Would you have fought back or folded? Let's step into a story about grace under pressure, quiet strength, and the kind of justice that changes everything. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a story that makes you feel, think, and remember. Rain tapped gently against the wide windows of Terminal C. Atlanta International Airport. Inside, voices blended with the steady hum of engines outside the glass. The world felt busy, normal until one voice changed the air. "Ma'am, can I see your boarding pass again?" Avery Morgan looked up. She was 42, dressed in a soft gray suit and low heels, the kind of outfit that meant effortless authority. Her tone stayed calm. "Of course," she said, handing over her phone. The digital screen glowed with seat 2A first class. The gate agent, a young man with crisp blonde hair, squinted at it. "You're in the wrong line. This one's for first-class passengers." Avery's voice stayed gentle. "I know. I'm in 2A. He looked again, this time slower, confusion creeping across his face. The people behind her started shifting, checking watches, murmuring. Then came the line that always came soft, practiced, heavy. "I just need to double-check something." Avery smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No problem. Take your time." She had learned long ago that patience could sound like power. "Oh." 5 minutes stretched to 10. The agent whispered with a supervisor, pointing subtly toward Avery. Their faces carried that same polite disbelief, the look that asked without words, "How could someone like her be there?" Finally, the supervisor, Melissa Grant, stepped forward, voice coated in sugar. "Dr. Morgan, we're having a small issue verifying your ticket. Could you step aside while we clear the other passengers? Step aside." Always that phrase. Soft enough to sound professional, sharp enough to slice dignity in half. Avery's hand tightened around the strap of her leather bag. She glanced at the digital clock, 6:17 p.m. Her flight to Seattle. Flight 273 was boarding now. She was supposed to arrive early for the Tech Ethics Summit, the same summit her company had sponsored. She took a slow breath. "Melissa," she said quietly, "that seat was purchased under the corporate account of Helix Dynamics. You can call your system. You'll see my name on it." The supervisor smiled again, the kind of smile that meant, "You don't scare me. You just annoy me." "Oh, I'm sure it's just a mix-up," she said, turning to the next traveler. "Sir, welcome aboard." Behind Avery, murmurs rippled. A man in a navy blazer whispered, "They're really checking her that hard." Another woman muttered, "Maybe it's fraud, these scammers." Avery heard every word, but her face didn't change. She had been here before, in boardrooms, in banks, in airports, that all claimed to treat everyone the same tone, the same dance. One step back, one apology later, And somehow, she was always the problem. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant gate changed you boarding, yet she typed back with steady fingers. Not yet. Delay at the desk. Then she looked at the gate agent again. Is there someone else I can speak with? He didn't look up. Ma'am, please wait over there. She moved to the side. The carpet was patterned with dull gray swirls. Every airport floor looked the same. Through the glass wall she could see the plane, a silver body resting under soft evening rain. Seat 2A waited for her behind that door, the same seat she had chosen weeks ago. Her mind drifted not to anger, but to memory. Her mother, a school teacher in Birmingham, always said, when they question where you belong, don't argue. Just show them the work that got you there. That voice returned now, warm and steady. Avery's work was Helix Dynamics, a cybersecurity firm whose systems monitored nearly half the airlines in the U.S., including this one. Irony had a cruel sense of timing. The line thinned. Passengers disappeared down the jet bridge. Avery stood alone now, still waiting. Finally, Melissa returned. Dr. Morgan, we reassigned your seat. There was a verification issue on the booking, so we placed you in 18C, middle seat, 18C, economy. The words hit like static. Avery blinked once, twice. She could have argued, shouted even. Instead, she simply said, Under what authority did you change it? Melissa crossed her arms. Ma'am, we have the right to reseat passengers if there's a concern about authenticity. It's for everyone's safety. Safety. Avery repeated the word slowly, tasting its bitterness. Tell me, what part of me looks unsafe to you? Melissa's eyes flickered. She didn't answer. Ma'am, if you don't wish to board, we can remove you from the flight. There it was, the threat, the quiet erasure. Avery looked down at her boarding pass, the name Dr. Avery Morgan glowing against the blue light. She imagined her daughter's face at home in Atlanta, waiting to hear that her mother had made it safely. She thought of the conference panel titled Ethics and Equity in Artificial Intelligence. The irony almost made her laugh. Then, calmly, she picked up her phone. Her thumb hovered over a contact labeled E. Daniels Helix Ops Director. She whispered, barely audible, Ethan, Initiate Protocol Redline. And just like that, a quiet system deep within Helix Dynamics woke up a network that connected to the airline's entire data security grid. Tiny signals began to blink in hidden dashboards. Unauthorized ticket modification, access anomaly, bias flag triggered. Within seconds, the airline's compliance system froze. Confused by the alerts, Avery slipped her phone into her bag. Still calm, still polite. Melissa, she said softly, I understand you have policies, but so do I. The supervisor frowned. Excuse me. Avery smiled warm, unbothered. You'll find out in about 30 minutes. She turned toward the window, her reflection framed against the rain-soaked runway, the hum of jets echoing behind her. The world kept moving, but something had already shifted. The terminal lights dimmed slightly as the evening grew deeper. Dr. Avery Morgan stood by the window, her reflection cast against the rain-streaked glass. Outside, the jet engines roared softly like a restless sea. Inside, everything looked polished, controlled except for the way people had just looked at her. She could still feel it on her skin, the silent judgment that whispered, "You don't belong here." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't curse. Instead, she stood perfectly still, like a calm storm waiting for its cue. Years of boardroom wars had trained her well. The louder they tried to strip her of dignity, the quieter she became. Because quiet had power. Behind her, the final passengers boarded. The gate door beeped shut. The same supervisor, Melissa Grant, walked past, glancing quickly at Avery, pretending not to see her, but that glance carried something unease, maybe, or a flicker of guilt she wouldn't name. Avery glanced at the digital clock again. 6:42 p.m. 30 minutes? That's all it would take. She found an empty chair near the window, far enough from the counter to breathe. Her phone vibrated once. A message from Ethan Daniels, her operations director. Ethan, Redline activated. "Are you safe, Avery? I'm fine. Keep it quiet for now." She set the phone down and exhaled. Her heart wasn't racing. Not yet. But beneath her calm exterior, thoughts pulsed like quiet electricity. She knew what she had just triggered. The Redline protocol wasn't a threat. It was an audit, a self-contained watchdog system designed to detect unethical practices within Helix partner networks. She'd built it after the last time an airline lost her seat. That night, 2 years ago, she had promised herself never again. A family walked by a father, mother, and a teenage girl laughing over snacks. The girl wore a hoodie with the word STEM across it. Avery smiled faintly. The sight reminded her of her daughter, Leah, who always called airports places where the sky forgets to judge. She reached into her bag and touched the tiny silver bracelet Leah had given her before this trip. For good luck, Mommy. The simple gesture grounded her. She looked back toward the counter. Ryan, the young gate agent, was speaking quietly to a man in a dark suit who had just arrived. His badge read Airport Security Supervisor. Avery could guess what was being said, that she had caused a disruption, that maybe she refused to comply. It was always the same narrative quiet women of color turned into threats the moment they stopped apologizing. The man's gaze met hers across the room. He walked over. "Dr. Morgan." His voice was polite but rehearsed. "We've been informed of an issue regarding your boarding pass." "No issue," she replied calmly. "Only a choice someone made without authority." "I understand," he said carefully. "But for now, I'll have to ask you to step out of the gate area while we investigate." Avery tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Are you removing me from the flight? I'm just following protocol, ma'am." She stood, lifted her carry-on, and gave a small nod. Of course. Protocol. The words tasted like irony. As she walked away from the gate, a few passengers looked up from their phones, curious. No one said anything. No one ever did. Down the hallway, she found a quiet bench near the closed coffee kiosk. The air smelled of roasted beans and disinfectant. She sat, opened her laptop, and logged into the Helix command console through a secure channel. The interface blinked alive rows of data. Connection logs, timestamps, everything precise. In the lower corner of the screen, a red icon pulsed slowly. "Falcon Air security integrity compromised," Avery whispered under her breath. Already she clicked open the diagnostic window. The system had automatically flagged the airline's internal user account, and access override linked directly to the gate supervisor's terminal. Unauthorized seat reassignment. Time-stamped, logged, verified. It wasn't just unethical, it was illegal under their data handling agreement. Her pulse quickened, but not from fear, from purpose. She opened a secure call line. Ethan answered immediately. Dr. Morgan, the compliance system just went into lockdown mode. The airline's internal servers froze. I know, she replied. I saw it. Keep the sequence running, but don't escalate yet. Let them notice first. Ethan hesitated. You sure you want to go this far? She paused, her voice soft. Ethan, I didn't make them treat me that way. They chose to. I'm just holding up a mirror. He sighed. Understood. The call ended. Silence again. Only the rain outside kept rhythm. Minutes passed. Then, the terminal's overhead speakers crackled. Attention Falcon Air passengers. We're experiencing a brief delay on Flight 273 due to technical issues. Please remain seated. There it was. The beginning. Avery leaned back in her chair. Her reflection in the dark laptop screen looked tired but steady. She wasn't proud of what was happening. She was resolved. The only way to make systems change was to make their failures visible. Melissa Grant's face flashed in her memory, the smirk, the dismissive tone, the easy assumption that someone like Avery couldn't possibly be who she said she was. She thought of her grandmother's words again. Dignity is not silence. It's the way you speak when they expect you to shout. Her phone buzzed once more. Another message from Ethan Falcon Air HQ just logged into our portal. They're asking if there's a data breach. Avery, no breach. Just an ethical reminder. She closed the laptop gently. The terminal felt colder now. Somewhere far away, on the tarmac. Engineers and IT staff were scrambling to understand why every gate system tied to Falcon Air's database had frozen. What they didn't realize was that the code itself was doing what it was meant to do, pausing operations the moment it detected a bias-triggered action tied to Helix's network. She didn't want chaos. She wanted accountability. As she waited, a little girl approached her, a stranger, maybe 7 or 8, with curls bouncing as she walked. Hi, the child said shyly. Are you a pilot? Avery blinked, then smiled warmly. No, sweetheart. I just help keep airplanes safe. The girl grinned. That's cool. My mommy says people who fix things make the world work. Avery's chest tightened. She's right. The girl waved and ran back to her mother. The brief exchange softened the air, a reminder of why she did what she did. Not for revenge, but for the little girls watching those who deserved to believe that the sky belonged to them too. She looked out again at the runway. The plane that was supposed to take her to Seattle still hadn't moved. Crew members huddled near the entrance, talking urgently into radios. Her phone buzzed once more. Ethan, again. Corporate line just called. They want to speak with you directly. Avery straightened, brushing invisible dust from her blazer. Patch them through. A moment later, a man's voice filled her ear. Calm, professional, but tight with concern. Dr. Morgan, this is Robert Caldwell, Vice President of Operations at Falcon Air. We're seeing a critical systems freeze originating from your company's network. Are you aware of this? I am, she replied evenly. Can you explain what's happening? I could, she said softly, but I think you already know. A pause. Then his tone changed lower, uneasy. We've received reports of an incident at the Atlanta gate involving you. I'm very sorry if there was any misunderstanding. She closed her eyes briefly. It's not a misunderstanding, Mr. Caldwell. It's a pattern. He exhaled audibly. We're working to correct it immediately. I'm sure you will, she said. I'll give you 30 minutes before the system escalates to federal compliance oversight. Avery, Dr. Morgan, please. Let's discuss this. I'm done discussing. I've been discussing for 20 years. She ended the call. Outside, thunder rolled softly over the horizon. Inside, every screen in Falcon Air's operations center began flashing the same message in red: ethics violation detected, system lock pending. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the sound of power shifting hands. Dr. Avery Morgan closed her laptop, stood, and whispered to herself, "Let them see what silence can do." Then she walked toward the exit, her reflection fading into the rain-glazed glass, calm, steady, unstoppable. The automatic doors slid open, letting in a rush of cool night air scented faintly of jet fuel and rain. Dr. Avery Morgan stepped outside the terminal, her suitcase wheels rolling softly against the wet pavement. Every light around her shimmered in the puddles, as if the world itself reflected uncertainty. She paused beneath the awning and inhaled, calm, deliberate, almost meditative. Inside the terminal, chaos had already begun. She could sense it in the subtle vibration of her phone news alerts, internal system pings, status updates from Helix Dynamics. But out here, for one brief moment, there was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before the truth starts to echo through walls. She sat on a metal bench near the drop-off lane, opened her phone, and saw the first notification: Falcon Air system outage affects multiple gates. A link to a trending post followed. Someone had captured a short clip from the boarding gate, the supervisor's condescending tone, her calm response, the awkward silence that followed. The caption read, "Why was this woman treated like a threat for sitting in first class?" Avery frowned slightly. She hadn't wanted attention, not yet. The internet, though, never waited for permission. Her phone buzzed again. "Ethan, Dr. Morgan, it's spreading. 3 major terminals have reported full system freezes. The compliance algorithm went live faster than expected." "Any security breaches?" she asked. Voice steady. "None. But the airline's trying to override the lockdown manually. We've already logged every attempt." Avery nodded to herself. "Keep recording. Let them try." As she spoke, a drizzle began to fall again, speckling her sleeves. Across the lane, a taxi driver leaned against his car, watching her with mild curiosity. She smiled politely, and he looked away. That was the thing about moments like this. They drew attention even when she didn't want it. Something about a woman who refused to bow made people uncomfortable. She tucked her phone away and glanced back toward the terminal. Through the glass, she could see movement agents huddled, managers gesturing frantically. On the large display board, red text flickered, "Delayed. System review in progress." Somewhere deep in Falcon Air's headquarters, she knew the executives were already scrambling for answers. Her phone rang again. This time a different tone, her private line. She hesitated for half a second, then answered. "Avery Morgan," she said. A female voice came through, sharp and anxious. "Dr. Morgan, this is Catherine Lee, Chief Legal Officer at Falcon Air. We need to understand what's happening. The entire East Coast network just went offline. We've traced it to a Helix monitoring protocol." "Yes," Avery replied evenly. "The Redline protocol. You agreed to its installation 18 months ago. It's a compliance safeguard." Catherine hesitated. "It wasn't supposed to shut down our systems." "It doesn't," Avery said. "It pauses them when ethical violations are detected." "Ethical violations," the woman repeated, incredulous. "You can't be serious." Avery's voice softened, but there was steel beneath it. "Your staff humiliated a verified passenger, reassigned a paid seat without authorization, and flagged me as a potential threat." That's exactly what Redline is designed to respond to. A moment of silence. Then the lawyer whispered, "My God." "Tell your team to stop tampering with the system," Avery continued. "Every manual override creates a new record. It'll go straight to federal auditors if this isn't handled properly. Can we meet?" Catherine asked quickly. Face to face. Avery checked her watch. 7:06 p.m. 30 minutes since the gate incident. "I'll be at the Westbridge Hotel near the terminal," she said. 1 hour. She ended the call before hearing the reply. As she walked toward the curb, thunder rolled in the distance, low and patient. She pulled her blazer tighter around her and flagged a car. The driver, an older man with soft eyes, nodded when she said the destination. The ride was silent except for the hum of the tires and faint jazz on the radio. Avery's thoughts drifted to Leah, to her mother, to all the times she'd chosen grace over anger and still found herself measured by her skin before her credentials. Inside Falcon Air's operations center, meanwhile, alarms blinked across screens. Engineers scrambled to explain the freeze to their supervisors. Robert Caldwell stood over the team, jaw tight. "Find the trigger," he ordered. "Now." One of the technicians pointed nervously to the display. "Sir, it's not a virus. It's built into our own system. A Helix module." Caldwell cursed under his breath. "How the hell does one woman shut down half an airline?" A younger analyst looked up. "Sir, that one woman designed our cybersecurity framework." The room fell silent. Back at the hotel, Avery checked in quietly under her own name. The concierge recognized her. Helix Dynamics was one of their corporate partners and greeted her warmly. A small mercy in a day full of small humiliations. She went up to her suite, took off her damp jacket, and stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back looked composed, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. She sank into the chair by the window, laptop open again, reviewing the real-time reports. The numbers were staggering. Dozens of flights delayed, hundreds of employees locked out of terminals, passenger outrage beginning to ripple online. She didn't smile. She didn't want chaos. She wanted attention where it hurt the systems that normalized mistreatment. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She stood, opened the door. Catherine Lee stood there, hair pulled back, raincoat still damp. Her face carried the look of someone who had been trying to fix the unfixable. "Dr. Morgan," she began, "I appreciate you meeting me." Avery gestured toward the small table by the window. "Sit down. You look like you've had a long evening." Catherine managed a tired laugh. "That's one way to put it." For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the rain against the glass. Then Avery said quietly, "You know, I never wanted this. I wanted to board a plane, sit in my seat, and go to work." Catherine looked at her hands. "I know, and I'm sorry. Truly. We're reviewing the incident. The supervisor will be suspended." "It's not about one supervisor," Avery said. "It's about the culture that trained her to see me as suspicious before she saw me as human." Catherine nodded slowly. "We've had complaints before, not as public as this, but they get buried." "Not this time," Avery said simply. The lawyer hesitated. "What do you want?" Avery leaned back. "I want accountability that lasts longer than a headline. Mandatory anti-bias training for every employee, transparent reporting on complaints, and a partnership audit Helix will monitor compliance for 1 full year." Catherine blinked. "That's extensive. Then start now." Avery replied, "Because in exactly 30 minutes, the system escalates to the Department of Transportation's Ethics Board. Every log, Every recording, every name will go public. Catherine swallowed hard. You built all this? I built it, Avery said, because people like me needed proof that our stories weren't imagination. The lawyer exhaled. I'll make the call. Good, Avery said softly. You have 28 minutes. After Catherine left, Avery returned to the window. The rain had softened into mist. Somewhere out there, a plane engine roared back to life. She didn't feel victorious, just steady. Some victories weren't about winning. They were about being seen. She reached for her phone and opened a message from Leah. Received an hour earlier. Did you take off yet, Mommy? Her fingers hovered before she replied, Not yet, sweetheart, but soon. Just fixing something that was broken. She hit send and smiled faintly. The glow from the phone screen caught the edge of her bracelet, making it shine like a quiet promise. Outside, in the distance, the first headlines began to appear. Falcon Air faces massive data freeze. After racial bias allegation, sources confirm Helix Dynamics CEO involved in ongoing audit. Avery closed her eyes, letting the moment settle. The world was finally listening, not because she shouted, but because she refused to whisper. By the time dawn began to thin the horizon, the city below seemed smaller, quieter, as though it too was waiting to see what would happen next. In her suite, Dr. Avery Morgan sat cross-legged on the couch, eyes on the open laptop. Lines of text scrolled like silent testimony system logs, timestamps, fragments of coded accountability. Every blink of red confirmed what she already knew. Falcon Air's executives were awake, frantic, and trying to contain the storm she'd started. A soft knock broke her focus. She looked up. Ethan's face appeared on the video screen. He looked exhausted, shirt slightly wrinkled, eyes alert behind thick glasses. Morning, boss, he said quietly. They've tried 6 overrides since midnight. Each one's flagged as an ethics violation. We've got a complete chain of custody for every access attempt. Avery nodded, her tone even. Good. Don't release the data yet. Let them come to us. Ethan hesitated. You really think they will? They have no choice, she said. When a system built on silence finally starts speaking, people listen if only to save themselves. She closed the video call, then stretched, standing to pour coffee from the small hotel pot. Outside, rain had given way to a light fog curling through the morning light. The news played softly on the muted television, talking heads debating corporate ethics, racial sensitivity, data meltdown. Her name scrolled across the ticker like a headline she'd never asked for. Her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID read Robert Caldwell. She waited a moment before answering. Mr. Caldwell, she said. His voice was hoarse, as if he'd spent the night chasing control that kept slipping away. Dr. Morgan, I've been instructed to reach out personally. Our CEO and the board would like to arrange an emergency meeting. This has gone beyond one airport. The FOA is asking questions. Investors are panicking. I'm aware, Avery replied. We'd prefer to handle this internally. Internal handling is what created this problem, she said softly. It's time the public sees accountability, not press statements. There was a long pause. Then, cautiously, he asked, what would it take to fix this? Avery turned toward the window. The clouds outside were beginning to thin, a streak of sunlight cutting through the gray. 30 minutes of truth, she said. That's all it ever takes. She didn't wait for his answer. Ending the call, she dialed Ethan again. Prepare the conference link. Send invites to Falcon Air's executive board, their compliance lead, and Catherine Lee. Mark it as urgent. Ethan exhaled sharply. All of them. You want the entire board watching. I want transparency, she replied. If they're going to rebuild their system, they should start by seeing the cracks. An hour later, in a sleek virtual conference room that bridged Atlanta and Falcon Air's New York headquarters, faces appeared in neat rows, executives in suits, eyes heavy with fatigue and defensiveness. Catherine sat off to one side, hands clasped, watching both sides like a translator between two languages, power and truth. Avery began simply. Before we discuss solutions, I'd like to show you something. She clicked her mouse. On screen, a recording from the Atlanta terminal played the supervisor's dismissive voice, the visible discomfort on the passengers' faces, her own calm restraint. Then the moment when the guard approached, the silence that followed. Every second was time-stamped, authenticated. When the clip ended, no one spoke. Oh, finally. One of the older board members cleared his throat. Dr. Morgan, this is regrettable. But she cut in quietly. Regrettable is a delay. This was deliberate. Another executive leaned forward. Are you suggesting intent? That our employees targeted you because of race? I'm not suggesting, she said, tone still soft. I'm showing you the pattern your own system ignored. Ethan brought up the next slide internal reports from previous passengers with similar complaints, each marked resolved without action. As the list grew longer, the room's silence thickened. Robert Caldwell rubbed his temple. We can't change what happened in the past, but we can correct this now. Tell us what you want. Dr. Morgan. Avery folded her hands. First, formal acknowledgement of discrimination. Second, restitution for those affected. Third, a new equity protocol built directly into your operations training, oversight, and live monitoring under Helix's ethical governance. That's unprecedented, one executive muttered. So was what happened to me, Avery replied. Catherine finally spoke, voice quiet but firm. She's right. If we don't move forward with this, the government will intervene. Helix system already flagged us to federal compliance. We have hours, maybe less. For a moment, Avery thought she saw something shift fear. Yes, but also realization. The recognition that this wasn't about her anymore. It was about the culture they had let rot beneath polished mission statements. One of the board members, a woman named Elaine Carter, spoke up. What if we make this partnership public show that we're embracing reform instead of resisting it? Avery met her gaze. Then maybe you'll start rebuilding trust instead of managing headlines. Caldwell nodded slowly. I'll bring it to the CEO, but we need assurance the systems will be restored once we commit. They'll release automatically once the agreement is initiated. Avery said, the technology responds to integrity. He gave a faint, tired smile. You designed quite the machine. Dr. Morgan. I designed it for moments like this, she said. The meeting ended after 2 tense hours. As screens blinked off, Catherine stayed behind in the call. You did what none of us could, she said softly. You forced them to look at themselves. Avery shook her head. I didn't force them. I just stopped excusing them. After the call, she stood at the window again. The fog was lifting, revealing streaks of blue sky between the clouds. For the first time since the airport, she let herself exhale fully. The Redline system would begin reversing the lockdown as soon as the agreement documents were signed. Her phone buzzed once more this time. A message from Leah. Mommy, they're talking about you on TV. Are you okay? Avery smiled faintly. I'm okay, baby. Just teaching grown-ups how to behave. She closed her eyes and thought of her mother again, the woman who'd scrubbed floors in Birmingham hospitals so her daughter could study science, who always said, never shout to prove your worth. Let your work echo louder than their doubt. Those echoes were everywhere now on screens, in headlines, in boardrooms that had never spoken her name before. And for the first time, Avery didn't feel invisible. Later that afternoon, Falcon Air's official statement went live. It admitted failure, announced the new oversight initiative, and suspended multiple employees pending review. Social media exploded. Some applauded her courage. Others questioned her motives. But the noise didn't matter. The silence had already broken. In the quiet of her hotel room, as the city pulsed beyond the glass, Avery whispered to herself, "Justice isn't loud. It's persistent." That night, she finally allowed herself to rest. Not in triumph, but in peace, the kind that comes only when truth stops hiding behind policies. The morning after the statement went public, the world didn't slow down. It spun faster. Cable news anchors filled every second with speculation. Hashtags like Tansh Seat 2A and Your Redline protocol trended across social platforms. Some called Dr. Avery Morgan a hero. Others called her dangerous. For her, none of it mattered. She hadn't done this for applause. She'd done it because silence had cost too many people their dignity. In the suite at the Westbridge Hotel, sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, painting soft gold across the floor. Avery sat at the desk, phone pressed to her ear, her voice calm yet firm. "Catherine, the system will remain active until the terms are finalized. Transparency isn't a headline, it's a habit." On the other end, Catherine Lee sighed, weary but supportive. The CEO signed the agreement last night. They're moving forward with the reforms. But Avery, the backlash online is intense. Some investors are threatening to pull out. Avery's tone softened. Change always costs something. The question is whether they're willing to pay for integrity. Catherine hesitated before replying. There's talk of you being invited to testify before the Senate Committee on Corporate Accountability. They want to understand the ethics framework you used. That's fine, Avery said. I'll explain it. Maybe they'll start building systems that protect people instead of just profits. After the call, she closed her eyes for a moment, grounding herself. The world outside might be spinning, but inside her, there was stillness. Every major change she'd ever sparked had begun with that stillness. Her laptop chimed a video call from Ethan. His voice carried a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Boss, we've restored partial access to Falcon Air's networks. The new training module is already live. But I need to tell you something." She glanced up. "Go on." "There's chatter that a group of shareholders wants to challenge your company's involvement. They think you overstepped your authority." Avery's lips curved slightly. "Of course they do. People don't like mirrors that show them what they've ignored." Ethan nodded slowly. "You should also know that Melissa Grant, the supervisor from the gate, released a statement. It's emotional. She's claiming she was following security protocol, not acting out of bias." Avery leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. That's how denial begins, with justifications wrapped in procedure. But the footage speaks for itself. Let the truth stand. Ethan frowned. "Are you okay? I'm fine," she said. "But I'm tired of explaining humanity to systems built without it." He gave a small smile. "You sound like your old self again." "Maybe I am," she replied. After the call ended, Avery walked to the window. Below, the city was waking up, cars sliding through traffic, street vendors setting up, the hum of ordinary life continuing as if justice hadn't just shifted slightly closer. She thought of Leah, probably sitting in her classroom, telling her teacher proudly, "My mom helps fix unfair things." The image brought a warmth she hadn't felt in days. Her reverie broke when her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered, "This is Dr. Morgan." The voice on the other end was low, cautious. "Dr. Morgan, this is Elaine Carter from the Falcon Air Board. I wanted to thank you for yesterday. You didn't just hold us accountable, you gave us a chance to start over." Avery paused. Most people don't thank the storm for cleaning the sky. Elaine chuckled softly. "Maybe not, but you forced us to look up." They spoke for several minutes about the new compliance framework. Elaine seemed genuinely committed to reform, but beneath her tone, Avery detected something else, a trace of fear. "You sound like someone expecting a fight," Avery said gently. Elaine hesitated. "Between us, there's pushback coming from the inside. Certain executives think this partnership puts too much control in your hands. They're worried about losing autonomy." Avery's expression didn't change. "They should be worried about losing credibility. That's far harder to earn back." "I agree," Elaine said. "Just be prepared. They might not all play fair." After the call, Avery stood silently for a long moment. She knew that power rarely surrendered quietly. Every shift in structure came with a tremor underneath. But she'd spent her life learning how to stay balanced when the ground moved. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. When she opened it, a hotel staff member handed her an envelope sealed with Falcon Air's logo. Inside was a formal invitation to attend a press briefing that afternoon at the Atlanta terminal, the very place where everything had begun. A symbolic gesture. It said, "A chance to show unity and reconciliation." Avery stared at the letter. Unity, reconciliation, words that sounded lovely when printed, less so when lived. Still, she knew what needed to be done. 3 hours later, she arrived at the terminal. Cameras lined the entryway, journalists murmuring into microphones. The same fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting their sterile glow. She walked past the crowd, composed and measured. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. Executives from Falcon Air stood on a raised platform, faces rehearsed into humility. Catherine Lee met her near the podium. "You sure about this?" she whispered. "I didn't come for them," Avery replied quietly. "I came for everyone watching." When it was her turn to speak, she stepped up to the microphone. The room hushed. Flashbulbs popped. She looked out at the crowd, passengers, reporters, employees, and began. Yesterday, this place was a scene of humiliation. Today, it's a reminder of how quickly power can change shape. But power isn't the point. Dignity is. Her voice carried calm authority, not anger. "What happened to me isn't new. It happens in smaller ways every day to people who don't have systems that fight back for them. That's why we built Redline. Not to punish, but to protect. To remind corporations that ethics are not optional." She glanced briefly at the executives behind her. "Falcon Air has committed to change. I intend to make sure they honor that commitment." The applause started slowly, hesitant, then grew into something genuine. Reporters shouted questions. Flashes erupted. And for a brief moment, she saw something that looked like hope on the faces of employees who had watched silently before. After the press event, as she prepared to leave, a familiar figure appeared near the back Melissa Grant. Her posture was smaller now, uncertain. She approached cautiously. "Dr. Morgan," she said, voice trembling. "I wanted to apologize. I didn't mean for it to go that way." Avery studied her quietly. "Meaning well doesn't undo what was done." Melissa swallowed. "I know, but I'm learning, and I wanted to thank you for not destroying me." Avery's gaze softened slightly. "I didn't need to. The truth already did." Melissa nodded, eyes glistening, then turned and walked away. Outside the terminal, reporters called her name, but Avery kept walking. The air smelled of rain again, and for a moment she tilted her face upward, letting a few drops touch her skin. She thought of her mother's words, of Leah's laughter, of the quiet dignity her grandmother carried through decades of being unseen. 30 minutes of truth had shaken an industry. But what mattered now was what came after the work that happened when no one was watching. As she stepped into the waiting car, her phone lit up with a message from Ethan's system restored. Training modules deployed across all partner networks. Phase 2, ready whenever you are. Avery typed back, "Not yet. Let them breathe. Then we begin again." The driver pulled away from the curb. Behind her, the airport faded into the horizon, but the echo of her voice, steady, unshaken, remained. By evening, the noise around Dr. Avery Morgan had become impossible to ignore. Her name filled every screen, every headline, every debate. Commentators argued whether she was a visionary or threat. Some called her the woman who grounded an airline. Others painted her as too powerful for comfort. Yet beneath the noise, there was an undeniable truth. Something irreversible had shifted. For the first time, corporations were discussing ethics not as a slogan, but as survival. In her office at Helix Dynamics, Avery watched the city lights of Atlanta flicker to life beyond the glass wall. The view stretched for miles, a reminder of how far she'd come from those cramped Birmingham nights when her mother worked 2 shifts just to keep the lights on. Success had never been her goal. Stability had. But stability came with weight, and lately, that weight felt heavier than she expected. Her assistant knocked gently before stepping in. "Dr. Morgan, Mr. Daniels is here." Ethan entered, laptop under one arm, a cup of coffee in the other. "You've been on every network today," he said, setting the cup down beside her. "CNN called you the calm in a corporate storm." That's poetic for television. Avery smiled faintly. Calm is easier to understand than control. He took a seat. "The reforms are working. Falcon Air initiated the new oversight model. Their first bias training goes live next week." "You did it?" "I started it," she corrected softly. "But change doesn't hold unless someone guards it." Ethan studied her. "You sound worried." "I am." She turned from the window. "Because once the cameras turn away, people forget. They call it progress and move on." He hesitated, then said, "We could expand Redline, turn it into a broader system, not just for airlines, but banks, logistics, law enforcement contracts. Imagine if every major company had to prove fairness to operate." She considered it. The idea carried both promise and danger. And what happens when fairness itself becomes currency? When systems claim ethics, they don't live by Ethan's expression. Hardened, then at least they'll have to fake the right thing. That's still progress. Avery sighed, but her eyes softened. Maybe you're right. Maybe forcing the conversation is its own kind of justice. Her phone buzzed. A message from Catherine Lee. "We need to talk." "Off record." Avery raised an eyebrow. Catherine rarely uses those words. She called her immediately. Catherine's voice came through low. "Careful. Avery, there's something you should know. Some members of Falcon Air's old leadership are furious. They're claiming the Redline system violates privacy. They're petitioning the Commerce Board to audit Helix. Avery's tone stayed even. Let them. We built Redline to withstand audits. I know, Catherine said, but they're spinning this as government overreach. They're calling it technological blackmail. Ethan muttered under his breath. Classic deflection. Avery leaned forward. They're trying to turn the narrative. From discrimination to disruption. Yes, Catherine said. And they've hired a PR firm that specializes in political smear campaigns. Be prepared for personal attacks. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Avery replied, I've been attacked for existing since I was 15. This won't be new. Still, after the call ended, the air in the office felt heavier. Ethan sensed it too. They'll play dirty. Avery. I know, she said, but truth doesn't panic. She closed her laptop and stood, stretching slightly. Go home. Ethan, get some rest. He hesitated. And you, I'll stay a while. When he left, the office felt too quiet. She looked again at the city beyond the glass, thousands of windows glowing like stories. Some kind, some cruel. The hum of the air conditioner mixed with the faint rhythm of rain against the window. She thought of Leah, her daughter, who would be asleep by now. She pictured the child's face resting against the pillow, safe, unaware of the battles her mother fought to make sure her world would be fairer. A soft chime drew her attention. Another message, this one anonymous. You think you're untouchable. You've made enemies you can't see. Avery stared at it for a long moment. She'd received threats before, subtle ones, wrapped in professional language. But this was blunt, ugly. She deleted it without replying, though it left a cold trace in her chest. She turned off the main lights, leaving only the soft lamp near her desk. The glow cast her shadow long across the wall, tall, still, steady. She whispered quietly to herself, Don't flinch, not now. The next morning, the storm arrived exactly as Catherine had predicted. News outlets ran stories questioning whether Helix Dynamics had overstepped corporate authority. Opinion pieces painted Avery as manipulative, even vengeful. Talk shows framed her as too calm to trust. She didn't respond publicly. Instead, she doubled down on work. Helix communications team wanted to release a counterstatement, but she refused. We don't argue with noise. She told them, we build louder truths. By midday. Ethan stormed into her office, tablet in hand. You should see this, he said. He played a clip from a news conference. A former Falcon Air executive, Daniel Mercer, stood before cameras, claiming that the Redline protocol was an act of technological coercion. She used her access to cripple a national carrier, Mercer said. No one should have that kind of power. The words spread like wildfire. Ethan slammed the tablet shut. He's rewriting the story. Avery stayed quiet for several seconds. Power, she murmured, is always called dangerous when it changes hands. That night, she received another call, this one from an unexpected source. Elaine Carter. Avery, Elaine said, voice low. Mercer's statement was coordinated. He's working with investors who lost money when the flights were grounded. They're building a legal case. They want to frame Helix as a threat to national infrastructure. Avery sat up straighter. So they'll weaponize fear. Yes. And they'll use every stereotype they can paint you as reckless, emotional, a symbol of instability. They're counting on bias to finish what they can't prove. Avery felt the familiar burn in her chest. Not anger, exactly, but something colder. They still haven't learned, she said softly. I don't panic. I prepare. She called Ethan immediately after. Initiate shadow line. He hesitated. That's the contingency protocol. Are you sure? Yes. Quietly. If they want to fight in the dark, we'll light every corner. Shadowline wasn't retaliation. It was insurance. A diagnostic system designed to trace misinformation campaigns and map their financial backers. It didn't expose, it revealed patterns. Avery didn't believe in revenge, but she believed in records, and records never lied. By the time midnight came, the building had emptied. She sat alone, staring at the soft pulse of her computer screen. She thought about how quickly the narrative had flipped from victim to villain, from reformer to rebel. It didn't surprise her. Systems didn't surrender quietly. They rewrote themselves to survive. But she also knew something Mercer and his allies didn't once truth found daylight. It never went back underground. She saved her progress, stood, and gathered her things. As she stepped out of the office, her reflection in the elevator doors caught her eye, a silhouette of composure framed by the faint light of the city. For a fleeting second, she saw not herself, but the generations before her standing in that reflection, her mother, her grandmother, all the women who had taught her that silence could be powerful, but only if it led to action. She whispered to that reflection, "Let them talk. The story's not theirs to end." Outside, rain began to fall again, gentle yet insistent, as though the world was washing itself clean for whatever came next. The morning sun crept into the glass corridors of Helix Dynamics, slicing through the haze of exhaustion that hung over the building. The office, usually calm and controlled, buzzed like an electrical current. Whispers filled the hallways. Some employees looked proud, others anxious. The world outside had turned Helix into a symbol, a company that had forced a giant to kneel. But now, that same world was demanding to see if they could stand the pressure. Dr. Avery Morgan arrived early, as always. She walked through the lobby, shoulders square, head high, her heels making soft, deliberate clicks against the marble floor. Every eye followed her, but no one spoke. Even silence had begun to feel reverent around her. When she reached her office, Ethan was already there, pacing near the screen. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "I figured," she replied, setting her bag down. "What's the flavor today?" He turned the screen toward her. A headline blinked in bold type. "Whistleblower exposes CEO's secret control system." Beneath it, a grainy image of her face, distorted from a private security feed. "They're saying you used Redline to manipulate markets," Ethan said grimly. "That you deliberately froze Falcon Air to profit from shorted shares?" Avery stared at the screen, her face unreadable. "So that's the story they're going with." "It's spreading fast," Ethan said. "Stock analysts, political pundits, even foreign outlets. Mercer's fingerprints are all over this." She closed her eyes briefly, inhaling. "He's not trying to win. He's trying to stain the air around my name." Ethan slammed his hand against the table. "We can trace this." Shadowline already mapped the leaked 3 shell accounts, one registered through a media consultancy in D.C., linked to Mercer's group. "Give me an hour and I can expose all of it." Avery opened her eyes and shook her head. "Not yet. Not yet." He looked at her in disbelief. "They're assassinating your reputation in real time." She turned toward the window, watching the city hum below. "You don't fight mud with fire. You let it dry, then sweep it away." He exhaled in frustration, but he knew her tone too well, steady, patient, almost unnervingly calm. "You're planning something." I'm waiting for their next mistake, she said softly. They'll overreach. They always do. Hours later, her prediction proved right. At 3:47 p.m., a confidential memo surfaced online, a forged internal Helix document suggesting that Redline had been weaponized for strategic leverage. The leak was sloppy, too specific, too fast. Avery smiled when Ethan showed it to her. They just stepped into their own trap. How, he asked? The metadata, she said. It's encoded with the original edit time. Shadowline will trace it to the device that created it. Once we know where it came from, we'll have proof of fabrication. Ethan grinned for the first time that day. I'll start the trace. While he worked, Avery sat at her desk, the rhythm of keystrokes echoing faintly in the quiet room. She wasn't angry, she was resolute. Every smear, every lie, every whisper was proof that the system was terrified. Fear, after all, was the shadow of accountability. By the next morning, they had the data. Ethan burst into her office, breathless. It's done. The document was created on a private server belonging to DMS Strategies, the same PR firm Mercer's investors hired last week. Avery looked up slowly. And the funding trail? He grinned. A holding company in Delaware. But the money routes back to Falcon Air's old shareholder group, the same men who lost millions during the freeze. She nodded once. Send everything to Catherine Lee. Within the hour. Catherine called. Avery, she said, voice trembling slightly. This is more explosive than you realize. If we confirm these findings publicly, several executives could face criminal charges. They should, Avery said simply. Catherine hesitated. This could take the entire airline down. Thousands of jobs. Then let them rebuild honestly this time. There was silence on the line, followed by a sigh. You never make it easy. Do you? Avery smiled faintly. Truth never is. That afternoon, Helix Dynamics held its first press briefing since the smear campaign began. The media gathered in the glass atrium, cameras flashing like lightning. When Avery appeared, the noise died instantly. She stood at the podium, composed and radiant under the lights. Good afternoon, she began. I've been accused of manipulating systems, of using ethics as a weapon. Those accusations are false, but they reveal something important, that integrity frightens people who've learned to profit from its absence. The crowd murmured. Reporters scribbled furiously. I didn't create Redline to punish. She continued, I created it to prove that fairness can be measured. And what we're seeing now, these lies, these leaks, isn't resistance. It's proof that the truth hit the right nerve. A hand shot up. Dr. Morgan, are you suggesting that Falcon Air's former investors are behind this? She met the reporter's gaze. I'm not suggesting. I'm stating it. And by tomorrow, you'll have the documents to confirm it. Gas rippled through the room. Avery didn't flinch. You can't silence accountability by distorting it. You can't erase bias by burying evidence. We've recorded every data point, every transaction. The system remembers. When she stepped away from the podium, the room erupted questions, flashes, shouts. But she walked through it with quiet certainty, every movement deliberate, her expression unchanged. She didn't need to argue. The truth had already taken root. That evening, as the world absorbed her words, Mercer went live on a cable news show, red-faced and defensive. This woman is dangerous, he snapped. She's manipulating the system for her own gain. We can't let her redefine justice to suit her narrative. Across the city, Avery watched the broadcast in her living room. Leah sat curled up beside her on the couch, half asleep. head resting against her mother's shoulder. The television cast flickering light across the room, but Avery's focus was elsewhere on the rhythm of her daughter's breathing, the steady proof of everything she fought for. When the interview ended, Leah stirred slightly. "Mommy?" she mumbled, eyes still closed. "Are people being mean to you again?" Avery brushed a strand of hair from the child's forehead. "They're scared, baby. That's all." "Scared of what?" "Of change," Avery whispered. Leah blinked sleepily. "But change is good." Avery smiled softly. "Exactly." Later that night, Ethan sent one final message. "Shadowline complete. Data package verified and time-stamped. Ready for release." Avery replied with 2 words. "Wait until morning." She stood by the window, looking out over the quiet city. The same skyline that had once felt impossibly big now seemed small, manageable, even. She'd learned that storms didn't always roar. Sometimes they whispered, and when they did, their silence could shake the ground more than thunder ever could. In the reflection of the glass, her face looked both weary and unwavering. She whispered to her own reflection, "Tomorrow. They'll learn what silence sounds like when it speaks." The next dawn promised a reckoning. At exactly 7 ohm, the first rays of sunlight broke over the skyline, gilding the mirrored glass of Helix Dynamics headquarters. Inside, the building hummed with anticipation. The air carried the quiet tension that always preceded something irreversible. On every floor, monitors displayed the same countdown, release protocol, T-minus 10 minutes. "Doctor." Avery Morgan stood in her office, watching the clock. Her reflection in the window looked calm, almost statuesque, but inside her chest, her heart beat like a steady drum. Across from her, Ethan Daniels was already typing furiously, making final checks to the release server. "Everything's lined up," he said. "Once we hit send, every major media outlet, every regulatory agency, and every ethics board in the country will receive the Shadowline report. The data can't be retracted." Avery nodded slowly. "Good. Truth should never need a password." Ethan looked up, eyes flicking over her expression. "You sure you're ready for this after today?" "There's no going back." "There never was," she said softly. "But I'd rather lose comfort than conscience." He nodded, understanding. Then he clicked the final command. The screens blinked once. Then the file transmitted. Across the city and soon, across the world, servers began to receive the data. The report was 342 pages long, containing digital signatures, timestamps, and financial transactions linking Daniel Mercer's investor group to the fabricated documents and misinformation campaign. Every accusation against Avery and Helix had been purchased, scripted, and distributed with precision. Now, every lie had a receipt. Within 15 minutes, news outlets exploded, headlines changed in real time, leaked report exposes corporate conspiracy, Falcon Air investors caught in coordinated smear campaign. The truth spread faster than the lie ever had. Avery didn't celebrate. She simply watched. On the muted television, she saw her own face again this time beside the words "vindicated." But she knew victory wasn't the same as peace. Her phone rang. Catherine Lee's voice came through, breathless and shocked. "Avery, the Department of Justice just opened a formal investigation into Mercer's group. You've just rewritten how corporate ethics enforcement works." Avery smiled faintly. "We didn't rewrite it, Catherine. We just reminded them it exists." Catherine hesitated. "Do you realize what this means? They'll name you as a central witness, maybe even a regulatory consultant. This is history. History doesn't interest me," Avery replied gently. "Justice does. After the call, she sat down, the weight of exhaustion settling over her like a familiar blanket. For a long time, she simply breathed deep, deliberate, letting the air fill the silence that followed upheaval. Ethan broke the stillness. You know, the last time I saw this much chaos, it was a data breach. Only this time, the breach was moral. Avery smiled tiredly, and morality was overdue for an update. They both laughed softly, the sound fragile but real. By midday, the nation was watching. Television anchors dissected every detail of the Shadowline leak. Political analysts debated whether Helix had just triggered a new era of digital transparency or opened Pandora's box. Through it all, Avery stayed silent. She refused interviews, declined appearances. She believed the truth didn't need performance. It only needed time. But the people she'd exposed weren't silent. Mercer appeared on national television again, this time looking cornered, defensive. "This is an attack," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Doctor, Morgan manipulated data to make us look corrupt. This is what happens when unchecked power falls into the wrong hands." Avery turned off the screen. She'd already expected it. She didn't need to hear excuses from men who couldn't imagine being held accountable by someone like her. Later that afternoon, a knock sounded at her door. When she looked up, Elaine Carter stood there, holding a folder. "I thought you'd want to see this," Elaine said, placing it on Avery's desk. Inside were printed pages and internal memo from Falcon Air's interim board. It announced the company's partnership with Helix Dynamics for an independent ethics audit across all branches, starting immediately. "They made it official," Elaine said, her voice almost trembling. "Full compliance oversight. You'll have unrestricted access." Avery looked up, genuinely surprised. They agreed. Elaine nodded. "The new leadership wants to rebuild right. Mercer's faction is finished." For the first time in days, Avery allowed herself a deep, quiet smile. Then maybe something good can grow where arrogance once lived. Elaine sat down across from her, visibly relieved. "Do you ever stop thinking like a scientist?" "Never," Avery said, a hint of warmth in her tone. "Science is about proof, and so is justice." They spoke for nearly an hour, reflecting on everything that had happened, the risks, the backlash, the strange balance between courage and exhaustion. When Elaine left, Avery stayed by the window, watching the clouds drift lazily across the skyline. The storm was passing, but she knew storms always left something behind. Her phone buzzed. A video call request from an unknown number. She frowned, but answered. The screen flickered, revealing a familiar face. Melissa Grant. The woman's voice was hesitant. "Dr. Morgan, I didn't expect you to take my call. I take calls from anyone willing to speak honestly," Avery said. Melissa nodded nervously. "I've been following everything. I saw the report this morning. I wanted to say I'm sorry again. For all of it." Avery's expression softened. "Melissa, you don't owe me another apology. You owe yourself honesty. What matters is what you do after the apology." "I've been thinking about that," Melissa said quietly. "Falcon Air's offering new training positions. They asked if I'd help lead the inclusivity program. I said yes. I want to do better." Avery's eyes warmed. "Then you already have." When the call ended, she sat for a long time, the faint hum of the city in her ears. Somewhere deep down, beneath all the layers of policy and code and strategy, she felt something she hadn't felt in months' peace, small but certain. That evening, as dusk fell, Avery walked out of the building alone. The air was cool. the sky a canvas of fading color. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Leah's teacher. "Your daughter gave a presentation today on fairness," she said. "My mom builds systems that make the world tell the truth." "Thought you want to know." Avery smiled, her throat tightening slightly. She typed back a simple reply. "Thank you." She stood on the steps of Helix Dynamics, watching the city lights flicker to life. Around her, people passed by busy, distracted, unaware that the world had just shifted a little closer to justice. She whispered quietly, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." Behind her, the Helix logo glowed faintly against the dark glass, an infinity loop twisting into the shape of balance. And somewhere in that reflection, her mother's voice echoed in memory. "If you ever have to choose between being liked and being right, choose truth. It'll love you longer." Avery smiled through the quiet ache that came with remembering. She looked at the city once more before walking toward her car, her silhouette framed by the soft light of a world still learning to listen. The next morning, a headline would appear across national outlets. "Helix Dynamics CEO redefines corporate accountability from bias to balance." But Avery wouldn't see it. She'd already moved on to her next meeting with educators, community leaders, and engineers building the next phase of Redline's evolution. Because for her, justice wasn't a moment. It was maintenance. 3 weeks had passed since the Shadowline report reshaped the headlines, but the waves it created still rippled through boardrooms, government offices, and late-night debates across the country. Ethics, once a quiet afterthought in corporate culture, had become the loudest conversation in America. People quoted Dr. Avery Morgan in interviews, students referenced her in essays, and advocacy groups called Redline the conscience of modern business. Yet inside Helix Dynamics, the mood was more subdued. Avery had returned to work quietly, avoiding the cameras and invitations that flooded her inbox. She didn't crave applause. Her eyes were fixed on something else. What came after the applause? That morning, she sat in the glass conference room on the 32nd floor, reviewing a stack of papers. Ethan Daniels entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one beside her. "They're calling you a pioneer now," he said with a half-smile, "and a disruptor. Apparently, that's the new compliment." Avery didn't look up. Pioneer or threat, it depends on who's talking. He laughed softly. "Fair. But listen, I just got off a call with the Commerce Board. They want Helix to help design a new federal standard for algorithmic accountability. They want you to testify next month." Avery leaned back, letting the information settle. "Testify," she repeated. "They want to turn a moral principle into legislation." "That's what change looks like," Ethan said. "You started a movement. Now they want to make it law." She stared out the window. Movements are fragile. The moment you name them, someone tries to own them. Ethan studied her for a moment. "You're worried they'll twist it." "I'm worried they'll sanitize it," she replied. "Turn it into paperwork instead of progress." The conversation paused when her phone buzzed a call from Elaine Carter. Avery answered. "Avery," Elaine said, her tone both relieved and urgent. "You need to see what's happening. Falcon Air just released their new equity report. It's transparent, detailed, and they've credited Helix publicly for the audit model." Avery blinked. "They actually published it." "Yes," Elaine said. "And get this, the results are good. Bias complaints have dropped 40% in the first month. Employee satisfaction's up. The system works." Avery allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Then maybe something decent finally came from all this noise. Elaine hesitated. There's more. They're inviting you to the company's annual leadership summit next week to speak. Speak, Avery repeated, uncertain. They want you to address their entire workforce. New leadership, new culture. They said they want the person who made them look in the mirror to tell them how to keep it clean. Avery was silent for a long moment. Finally, she said, "Tell them I'll be there. After the call." She looked at Ethan. "Book me a flight to Seattle next Thursday. No press, no entourage." "Got it," he said. "You think it'll be awkward standing in the same room with the people who once called you a threat. Maybe," she said softly. "But sometimes you have to return to the scene of the wound to prove you've healed." That night, she had dinner at home with Leah. The little girl was building a model airplane at the kitchen table, glue and paper scattered everywhere. "Are you going on another trip?" Mommy Leah asked, not looking up. "Yes," Avery said. "Just for a day." Leah frowned thoughtfully. "Is it the same people who were mean to you?" Avery smiled gently. "Some of them." "Yes. Then why go?" "Because forgiveness isn't for them," Avery said. "It's for me, so I can make space for better things." Leah nodded as if she understood more than most adults. "You're going to fix them again, aren't you?" Avery chuckled. "Maybe just remind them how to stay fixed." When Thursday came, the air in Seattle carried that sharp, clean chill unique to the Pacific Northwest. Falcon Air's new headquarters gleamed under a pale sky. Banners outside reading "Integrity Takes Flight." Inside, the auditorium was filled with employees, journalists, and executives. The murmur of anticipation swelled as Avery walked to the stage. Every step echoed softly. But the room went utterly silent as she took her place behind the podium. She began slowly, her voice low but clear. 3 months ago, I stood in an airport terminal where dignity was treated like a privilege. Today, I stand in a company that chose to rebuild that dignity not as a response, but as a foundation. The crowd listened, transfixed. Change doesn't happen because systems want to evolve. She continued, it happens because people refuse to accept decay. What you're doing here isn't corporate reform, it's human repair. And repair takes humility. Her words hung in the air like threads of light. She looked toward the front row, where Melissa Grant sat among the new leadership team. Their eyes met briefly. Melissa nodded, tears glinting faintly. Avery finished with quiet conviction. Fairness isn't a trend, it's a discipline. And like flight, it only works when balance is maintained. The audience rose in applause, not loud or frenzied, but deep and sustained. The kind of sound that carries weight instead of noise. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Melissa approached her. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "I didn't think I'd have the courage to come today." "You did," Avery said. "That's how change starts." They shook hands, a gesture small in motion, but vast in meaning. Later that evening, as Avery waited for her flight home, she sat by the terminal window, the same kind of seat where everything had once gone wrong. She watched planes lift into the fading sky, each one a symbol of movement, of direction. Her phone buzzed again. "Ethan, you should see this," he said. "The FAA just announced they're adopting Redline principles for national compliance audits. They're naming it the Morgan Standard." Avery's breath caught. "The what?" He laughed. "You're officially regulation now." She leaned back in her chair, stunned. The Morgan Standard? She'd never sought legacy, but it had found her anyway. As she boarded her flight, she looked at the ticket in her hand. Seat 3A, a coincidence? Maybe, or maybe not. When she sat down, she smiled quietly. This time, No one questioned her place. No one hesitated. The flight attendant offered her tea with a polite smile and said, "Dr. Morgan, it's an honor having you with us." Avery nodded, her voice calm. "The honor's mine." As the plane ascended, she gazed out at the horizon. The clouds glowed like silver silk, endless and open. She thought of Leah, asleep at home, dreaming of skies that didn't judge. And for the first time, Avery allowed herself to feel at fully peace, earned and unshakable. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't just her story anymore. It belonged to every person who had ever been told they didn't belong, every quiet fighter who chose integrity over comfort, every voice that refused to fade. The world below was still flawed, still learning, but it was listening now. And that, Avery thought, was enough to keep her fighting. When the captain's voice came over the speaker, steady, routine, ordinary, she smiled. For once, ordinary felt extraordinary. The night after her Seattle speech, Dr. Avery Morgan returned to Atlanta to find a city transformed by her shadow. Billboards flashed her image beside headlines like the woman who rewired corporate morality. Podcasters analyzed her words as if she were scripture. News anchors debated whether the Morgan Standard would become the backbone of a new national policy. She had become an idea, one bigger than any human could comfortably wear. But Avery didn't feel like an icon. She felt like a woman who hadn't slept in days. When she entered her penthouse, the city stretched out in amber light below, quiet but pulsing. Leah was already home, curled up on the couch watching a documentary about airplanes. The child's voice was soft when she said, "Mommy, you're on TV again." Avery smiled faintly, dropping her coat. "I think the world's tired of hearing my voice." Leah shook her head. "Not me." Avery leaned down and kissed her forehead. "That's all that matters." But even as she said it, she knew the world wasn't done with her yet. The next morning began with another storm of calls and emails, government officials requesting consultation, universities inviting her to lecture, media producers begging for interviews. Ethan filtered as much as he could, but even he looked overwhelmed. "You've created a monster," he said with half a grin as he handed her a cup of coffee. "A beautiful, ethical monster. But still." Avery smirked. "It's not a monster. Ethan, it's a mirror. People just don't like what they see." He sighed. "Well, this mirror has just been invited to the White House." She blinked. "You're joking." "Nope." He handed her a letter printed on White House stationery. "They want you to meet with the Secretary of Commerce to discuss a national ethics framework. Looks like your 30 minutes of truth turned into policy reform." She read the letter slowly, the words blurring slightly. She'd spent her life designing systems for fairness, never expecting they'd reach this far. A wave of mixed emotions rolled through her pride. Fatigue, and a strange, quiet fear. "What if I'm not ready for that kind of stage?" she murmured. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You stared down billion-dollar corporations and didn't flinch. You're ready. Fighting corruption is one thing," she said softly. "But helping rebuild something that includes everyone, that's heavier." He gave a small, knowing smile. "Then it's a good thing you're strong." Later that day, as Avery walked through the Helix offices, she noticed something different. Employees didn't just nod respectfully anymore. They smiled, genuinely, as if her presence carried hope instead of distance. She'd always been respected, but now she was trusted. That difference meant more than any award could. At noon, she received a call from Catherine Lee. "Avery, I have to tell you, Falcon Air just launched their new campaign. They're calling it the Morgan Promise. It's all over social media. It's actually beautiful." Avery chuckled. "A PR campaign named after me? That's either redemption or irony." "It's sincere," Catherine insisted. "They're donating a percentage of every ticket to fund scholarships for underrepresented students in aviation. It's inspired by your daughter's story." Avery froze. Leah's story. Yes. Someone found that clip of her talking about fairness in school. It's gone viral. For a moment, Avery couldn't speak. The idea that her daughter, the quiet little girl who once hid behind her legs at public events, had become a symbol of something bigger was both humbling and terrifying. That evening, after work, she drove home in silence. The highway shimmered under the city lights, the radio playing softly in the background. When she reached the house, Leah was waiting by the window, holding her tablet. "Mommy, look," she said excitedly. "They're talking about me on the internet. On the screen." Avery saw her daughter's face smiling as a news anchor quoted, "Her fairness isn't just for grown-ups. It's how the world should work." The anchor smiled and said, "Maybe the youngest Morgan has inherited her mother's clarity." Avery laughed softly and pulled Leah close. "You're famous now," Leah giggled. "Does that mean I can stay up late?" "Nice try," Avery said, tickling her until they both dissolved into laughter. But as the laughter faded, Avery's thoughts grew heavier. Fame was fickle, and exposure could be cruel. She looked at her daughter, then whispered to herself, "I'll make sure this light doesn't burn you." The following week, Avery flew to Washington, D.C. The air there felt different, crisp, formal, saturated with ambition. As she entered the Commerce Department building, she caught her reflection in the polished marble floor. Power had a strange scent, sterile, expensive, and quietly hungry. In the meeting room, senior officials waited, their expressions a blend of admiration and calculation. The Secretary of Commerce, a tall woman named Veronica Hall, stood and extended her hand. "Dr. Morgan, it's an honor. You've done something extraordinary." Avery smiled politely. "Extraordinary isn't always comfortable." Veronica laughed. "That's why we're here to make it practical. We want to embed your system, the Morgan Standard, into federal oversight protocols, but we'll need your help defining the balance between privacy and accountability." Avery nodded slowly. Accountability without transparency is just control, and privacy without accountability is permission to harm. Balance isn't about compromise, it's about truth. The secretary studied her for a moment, then said softly, "You don't just design systems. Dr. Morgan, you design philosophies." By the end of the meeting, a partnership was in motion, one that would reshape how ethics were enforced nationwide. When Avery walked out into the crisp air of Pennsylvania Avenue, she looked up at the vast sky above the monuments and thought of her grandmother's words. "One voice can't move a mountain, but it can start the echo that shakes it." Her phone buzzed Ethan again. "You did it, didn't you?" he said, grinning through the line. "We did it," Avery corrected. "All of us." When she returned to Atlanta that night, she found a small box on her desk, a gift from the Falcon Air team. Inside was a miniature silver airplane engraved with 4 words, "She made the skies fair." She held it for a long moment, her chest tightening with quiet emotion. She placed it beside her daughter's photo on the shelf. Later, after Leah went to bed, Avery stepped out onto the balcony. The night air was cool, the city glittering below. Somewhere far off, a plane passed overhead, its lights tracing a slow arc through the darkness. She closed her eyes and whispered, "For every little girl who thought the sky was too far away." Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Melissa Grant. "I'm training new supervisors tomorrow. I'm using your story as the first lesson." Avery smiled, typing back, "Make sure they know it's everyone's story now." Then she turned off her phone and let the silence settle. Not the uneasy silence of injustice, but the kind that follows truth when it finally lands. For the first time in a long time, she felt weightless. Not because the fight was over, but because the burden had become purpose. And purpose was lighter than fear. As she stood there under the endless sky, she whispered the words that had carried her through every battle. Dignity isn't given, it's remembered. And tonight, she knew the world had finally remembered. By early spring, the world had adjusted to the new rhythm of ethics. Companies scrambled to prove compliance. Universities launched Morgan Standard workshops, and think tanks debated how far accountability should reach. Yet for Dr. Avery Morgan, the calm surface of progress hid a tremor underneath. Change, she knew, was never linear. It always provoked the old powers waiting in the dark. It started quietly, a late-night message from Ethan. "We may have a breach." When Avery arrived at Helix the next morning, the building felt tense. The usual hum of conversation had been replaced by silence. Ethan stood near the operations console, his face tight. "We detected an external access attempt to Redline's archives. They used an old authentication key, one that predates the Shadowline updates." "Whose key?" Avery asked. He hesitated. "Yours." A chill passed through her. "That's impossible." "I know," Ethan said. "We traced it to a node in Zurich. But whoever did this knew our system. They weren't after financial data, they went straight for the case logs. Specifically, the Falcon Air records." Avery's mind raced. "They're trying to discredit the Morgan Standard before it fully embeds." Ethan nodded grimly. "And if they twist those logs, they could frame you for data manipulation." Avery took a deep breath, her voice steady. "Then we fight it the same way we fought everything else, with transparency." They began combing through digital footprints, cross-referencing access logs and timestamps. Hours turned into an entire day. The deeper they dug, the clearer the pattern became. The attack had been orchestrated through multiple proxies, but its origin pointed to one familiar source, Daniel Mercer. "He's still out there," Ethan muttered, "even after losing everything." Avery frowned. Some men can't live without control. Losing it feels like death. That evening, Catherine Lee called from EC. "Avery, the Commerce Department just got a letter from Mercer's attorneys. They're accusing you of falsifying audit data and demanding a suspension of the Federal Ethics Partnership." Avery closed her eyes briefly. "He's desperate." Catherine's voice dropped. "Desperate men are dangerous. He's already briefing senators who want to slow the Morgan Standard rollout. If they believe him, this could stall the entire reform effort." Avery looked out at the city, its skyline glinting under the fading light. "Then I'll face them myself." 2 days later, she stood before a congressional subcommittee in Washington. Cameras clicked as she walked into the chamber, the air thick with curiosity and skepticism. Across the table sat senators, aides, and industry lobbyists, some supportive, others waiting for her to stumble. The chairwoman, Senator Ruth Delgado, adjusted her glasses. "Dr. Morgan, allegations have surfaced that your Redline system was used to manipulate data in a way that benefited your company's contracts. Can you speak to that?" Avery leaned forward, calm but resolute. "Yes, Senator, and I'll do so under oath." The room fell silent. She spoke clearly, her words cutting through the tension like a steady blade. Every line of code in Redline is timestamped, independently verified, and mirrored across neutral nodes. If anyone manipulated the data, the system itself would expose them, including me. Senator Delgado raised an eyebrow. "You sound confident." "I'm confident in truth," Avery said, "because it doesn't fear inspection." The hearing stretched for hours. Mercer's fabricated evidence crumbled under scrutiny, metadata discrepancies, false signatures, outdated encryption. By the end, it was clear who the real manipulator was. When the gavel struck to adjourn, the chairwoman turned to her with a faint smile. "Dr. Morgan, it seems the system you built just vindicated itself." Outside, the crowd of reporters swarmed her. Microphones flashed, voices shouted, but Avery spoke only one sentence before leaving. "Integrity doesn't need defenders, it just needs proof." That night, she returned home exhausted. Leah ran to her as soon as she walked through the door. "Mommy, are you okay?" Avery knelt down, hugging her tightly. "I'm okay, baby. Just tired." Leah looked up, eyes wide. "You always fix everything." Avery smiled softly. "Not everything. Just the things worth saving. Later." She sat on the balcony again, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. Ethan called to report that the breach had been sealed. Mercer's digital network shut down permanently. The DOJ had issued a new investigation into his group's offshore accounts. "You've won again," Ethan said. Avery shook her head. "No, Ethan. We've just removed another shadow. Winning isn't the goal, clarity is." He paused, then said quietly, "You know, sometimes I think you forget to let yourself rest." She chuckled. "Rest is a luxury I'll earn later." After the call, she sat alone, the cool air brushing against her skin. A memory surfaced, her mother's voice reading from an old poem when Avery was a girl. "When truth walks slowly, let patience carry its torch." She whispered those words now, letting them steady her heart. The next morning brought unexpected news. The White House issued a formal statement. The Morgan Standard will proceed as scheduled, with additional safeguards inspired by Helix Dynamics transparency protocols. It was victory wrapped in exhaustion. But this time, Avery didn't celebrate. She simply closed her laptop and went for a walk. Downtown, she passed strangers who recognized her. Some smiled, some stopped to thank her. One woman even handed her a folded letter saying, "You made my daughter believe she could study engineering again." Avery accepted it with quiet gratitude, her throat tight. When she returned to her office, she found a message waiting from Elaine Carter. Falcon Air's board has officially renamed their ethics division. It's now the Morgan Center for Accountability. They want you to attend the opening ceremony next month. Avery smiled gently. "Tell them I'll be there." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Leah joined her on the balcony. "You look tired, Mommy," she said. Avery laughed softly. "You sound just like Ethan." Leah giggled, then leaned against her arm. "Are you done fixing the sky?" Yet Avery looked up, the horizon painted in gold and violet. "Almost," she whispered. "But the sky doesn't stay fixed. You have to keep looking after it." Leah thought for a moment, then said, "Maybe that's what you were born to do." Avery turned to her daughter, eyes glistening. "Maybe it is." They sat together until the stars came out, the city below alive, but quieter now, humbled by change. Avery's world had shifted again, not toward noise, but toward balance. And for the first time, she realized that peace wasn't the absence of battle. It was knowing you had fought for something real and left the world a little fairer than you found it. As she carried Leah to bed, she whispered, "Sleep well, my little light. Tomorrow, we keep the skies clear." In the living room, her phone vibrated with a single new message from an unknown number. She opened it. The text read, "Thank you. You don't know me, but my son was denied a seat once too. You made sure it never happens again." Avery stared at the message for a long time. Then she smiled through tears she hadn't expected. The work wasn't over, but maybe, just maybe, it was working. The morning of the Morgan Center for Accountability's grand opening began with a calm that felt almost unreal. The sky stretched wide and flawless above Atlanta, painted in the same blue Avery Morgan had stared into as a little girl, wondering if she would ever be allowed to belong in a world that rarely saw her reflection in power. Now, the same sky bore her name. The Falcon Air campus shimmered in the early sunlight, its glass walls reflecting rows of people filing in: employees, journalists, community leaders, students, and ordinary travelers who had once been mistreated and now stood as witnesses to change. On the main building's facade, the new emblem gleamed in silver, a pair of open wings, balanced around a central circle engraved with 4 simple words, "Integrity takes flight." Avery stood just inside the lobby, watching everything unfold. She wore a soft gray suit, minimal makeup, and a quiet expression that carried both pride and restraint. She didn't crave attention. She wanted to make sure the moment meant something. Ethan Daniels walked up beside her, looking around with quiet satisfaction. "You did it," he said. "You turned a humiliation into a movement." Avery smiled faintly. "We did it," she corrected. "And it's not a movement. It's maintenance. Justice needs care, not applause." Ethan chuckled. "You always know how to turn a celebration into a philosophy." Before she could reply, a familiar voice called her name. Melissa Grant approached, looking almost unrecognizable, composed, confident, her Falcon Air badge clipped neatly to her jacket. "Dr. Morgan," she said warmly. "Welcome home." "Home," Avery repeated, the word tasting bittersweet. Melissa hesitated. "I wanted to thank you again for giving me a second chance. This center exists because you believed we could change." Avery looked her in the eye. "You changed because you wanted to. That's the difference." As they spoke, Elaine Carter appeared, clipboard in hand. "You're up in 5 minutes," she said, smiling. "The press is already buzzing. They're calling this the most important civil-corporate partnership in a decade." Avery sighed softly. "Let's hope it's not just another headline." When the ceremony began, the crowd quieted instantly. Cameras clicked, lights dimmed slightly, and Avery stepped to the podium. Her voice, calm and deliberate, filled the air. "3 years ago, I boarded a flight where I was told I didn't belong." She began. "Today, I stand in a place built to ensure no one ever hears those words again." She paused, letting silence speak for her. The Morgan Center isn't about punishment. It's about prevention. It's about turning mistakes into mirrors, and mirrors into change. It's proof that dignity can be taught, protected, and measured. Applause rose gently, sincere rather than explosive. Avery continued, her gaze steady on the crowd. "Some say justice is heavy. I say it's only heavy when you carry it alone. But when we lift it together, it becomes light enough to fly." Her words rippled through the room, subtle but electric, behind her. A screen lit up with images Helix engineers designing fairness algorithms, Falconer staff undergoing inclusivity training, students from low-income neighborhoods touring aviation academies funded by the new scholarship program. As she concluded, Avery's voice softened. "We're not fixing systems. We're healing people, and healing takes more than policy, it takes heart." When she stepped away from the podium, the applause this time came like a wave, full, rising, and alive. Even journalists who had once doubted her stood clapping. Melissa wiped tears from her eyes. Ethan stood in the back, arms folded, watching her with a look that said everything he didn't need to say aloud. After the ceremony, reporters gathered for interviews, but Avery politely declined. "Let the work speak," she said simply, before walking out through the glass doors into the bright morning. Outside, Leah was waiting, holding a small bouquet of daisies she'd picked from their garden that morning. The little girl's smile was shy, but proud. "Mommy, I saw you on the big screen. You looked brave." Avery knelt down, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. "Bravery isn't loud, sweetheart. It's just quiet honesty that doesn't quit." Leah handed her the flowers. "These are for you." Avery took them gently, her voice catching. "Thank you, my heart." They stood together for a long moment, mother and daughter, as the crowd dispersed behind them. The wind lifted slightly, tugging at Avery's hair, as if the sky itself was whispering its approval. Later that afternoon, as they drove home, the city passed in soft focus through the car windows, murals painted with her likeness, children waving flags with the Falconer emblem, people smiling as if they could finally breathe a little easier. But amid the noise of recognition, Avery stayed quiet. Her thoughts were already reaching forward. That evening, back at Helix Dynamics, she and Ethan met in the rooftop garden, a small, hidden space filled with greenery and soft string lights. Ethan leaned on the railing, looking at the skyline. "You realize what you've done, right? You've changed not just one airline, but an entire industry." Avery smiled, but there was a weight in her eyes. Change is a living thing. Ethan, you have to keep feeding it, or it starves. He studied her. "You ever think about stopping, about just resting?" She looked up at the stars. "Sometimes. But then I think about the next little girl in the next airport who'll walk into first class and be seen as she is not as a mistake, but as someone who belongs. That's my rest." Ethan nodded slowly. "You're something else. Avery." "Just human," she said softly. "That's all I ever wanted to be and all I ever wanted others to see." Before leaving, Ethan handed her a sealed envelope. "Open this when you get home. It's from the Falconer board." Later that night, when Leah was asleep, Avery sat by the window with a cup of tea, the envelope resting in her hands. She opened it slowly. Inside was a letter written in elegant handwriting. "Dr. Morgan, because of you, millions will board flights tomorrow without fear." We wanted to honor that with something permanent. Enclosed was a photograph, a bronze statue unveiled at the airport that morning. It showed a young black girl standing beside an airplane gate, looking upward, her reflection forming the faint outline of wings behind her. The plaque beneath read, "Dedicated to Dr. Avery Morgan, who taught the skies to remember." Avery pressed the photo to her chest, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. It wasn't pride that moved her, but relief, the kind that comes when pain finally transforms into purpose. She walked to Leah's room, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You'll fly higher than I ever did." When she returned to her window, she saw another plane ascending through the night sky. Its lights blinked steadily, vanishing into the clouds. She thought of all the passengers on board, each of them unknown to her, yet each unknowingly carrying a fragment of her legacy. The world, she realized, wasn't perfect. It probably never would be, but it was better tonight than it had been yesterday. And that was enough. She smiled softly, whispering to herself, "The sky remembers." Outside, the horizon glowed faintly, like a promise quiet, infinite, and unbroken. This story reminds us that dignity is not a privilege, it's a birthright. Dr. Avery Morgan's journey isn't just about a black CEO confronting prejudice. It's about what happens when integrity meets injustice and refuses to bend. Her calm courage teaches us that real strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "No more," and lets the truth do the rest. For older generations who have seen both progress and pain, this story is a reminder that change is never instant, but it's always possible. Systems can evolve, people can learn, and healing can begin when we choose accountability over silence. In life, you don't need power to make an impact. You need conviction. The world may test your worth, but no one can take away what you decide to stand for. Dr. Morgan didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard, and maybe that's what each of us can do. In our own small way, leave the world a little fairer than we found it. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it moved you, if it made you reflect, or if it reminded you of your own quiet battles, please don't let it stop here. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that touch the heart and challenge the mind. Because stories like these aren't just told, they're remembered. And together, we can make sure the world never forgets what dignity looks like.